the most important part of working those things up. And like I said, it's not always pleasant. There's times when you're just struggling and kicking and nothing seems to be going right with it. Very often I'll work all day and just it'll be a normal painting day, and at the end of the day I'm grumpy as hell. I'll come out of the studio and sort of bitch at my family or whatever, for no apparent reason. I've been sitting there, I wasn't struggling especially that day or something, I'm just painting, but I'll come out kind of grumpy at the end. So it's not necessarily a process that makes me all cheery and happy and that kind of thing. It's a sort of hard thing to get that image out and to get it to work as you saw it in your head. The thing that changed my palette dramatically was teaching. I got a job from RoboCop. Peter Weller called up. He was directing a movie with Jason Patric. It was called Incognito. It didn't end up being very good. But Jason was going to play the world's greatest forger, and he was going to forge a Rembrandt in this painting, in this movie. And I was hired to teach him how to paint and draw like Rembrandt in a month.
Wow.
I said, sure. And then I had to learn how to paint and draw like Rembrandt in a week. So, I got all these books together and started learning about that. And it changed the way I painted. I mean, I started reading this stuff and I realized, gosh, I understand some of this. The guy who was writing the book, who's I think now the head of the Getty, come to think of it, he came from the National Gallery in London, and the stuff that he was writing, some of it he was a little bit confused about, but as a painter I said, no, I understand what's going on here, and sort of put together from his book the way Rembrandt had painted, and then taught that. But through doing that with Jason Patric, it totally changed my palette, and now there's a lot of earth tones on my palette, and I think it's much more subtle painting that I'm doing now than certainly what I was doing in the 80s, where I was sort of banging all these strong colors on there, and they're all fighting against each other. Now it's just toned down a bit more, and that ends up being a much more subtle way to paint.
What is the underlying theme in most of your work?
It has to do with, I think, the interactions of people more than anything else. Sort of a psychology. There's a lot of themes going on, a lot of stuff happening, but I think the thing that generally attracts people to it has to do with the way people interact, and the way they recognize something either about themselves or about humanity in the faces and in the gestures of the people they see in my paintings. And that's the most immediate thing that attracts people. Beyond that, I have layers of personal meaning or layers of art history, or sort of different sort of social, political content. But I think that other thing is the thing that first attracts people, and first is sort of the gut hit of any image that I make is that. I paint the figure. I don't know if I love painting the figure. I paint the figure because it expresses so much about being human. I mean, it's something we relate to almost as if we're looking at another human being, and that's what's important to me. That connection to humanity. It's not a joy of painting the figure for the most part. In fact, life drawing, I do it because I find it important to sort of keep fluent with the body and to learn, but it's not a joy of doing it. And I don't know in painting the figure that it's a joy of painting the figure. It's a joy of making that image real and getting this vision that's in my head onto the canvas. The figure is very important in expressing what I have to express always, but it's not necessarily a love of the body as a body, as an object. It's a love of the expression of this idea more than that.
And you were once quoted saying your paintings bear the hint of the hilarity of being human.
Yeah, that's related to that, I think. That's the quote that goes on the Open Museum page where I have been posting stuff. There's a humor in my work, which at first they appear kind of dark and scary, but there's always something funny. I spend a lot of time in here painting, and there's stuff in the paintings that I'll start laughing about, and this is really funny, and keep going on it. Most people are sort of shocked by the image and don't get to that point. Some of my friends will come in and they'll start laughing too, and they sort of get what I was at in a certain piece. But for the most part, people don't connect humor to my images. But it's usually in there in some way. Even in the darkest stuff, there's something that I'll find to laugh about. So the hint is just that. There's a hint of it. I put it as the main quote at the Open Museum just because most people will miss that humor.
And in the series, The Seven Laughters of God, there is a painting entitled Time of a man sitting a Rembrandt in a museum. Can you explain what that painting means to you?
Well, I guess at one level, it certainly has to do with, that connection to the past that I was talking about. That Rembrandt was an important artist for me because I got some stuff out of his palette, and from the way he paints, it really altered the way I work. And as I said, he's one of those artists that you connect to the people in, almost as if they're alive. You look at those faces, and when you're in front of those in a museum, and it's like you're facing another person, and that's a pretty remarkable thing. So Rembrandt's really an artist that I admire, both in the way he paints and because of that connection to the past. And that connection to the past is something that's important to me as a figurative artist. So on the one level, you've got that young artist there stealing that Rembrandt because he's both in love with it, and it's something that he feels is very important. Maybe he's taking it out of the museum because he feels he's got a better place for it. In that painting, there's the old room that he's running from that would have had that Rembrandt painting in it. He's going through sort of a contemporary area that has sort of a collage, Rauschenberg type stuff and some pop art. And in the next room is sort of the one I thought of as the future room. There's a image that's being projected on the wall of something like a preacher or something. It's kind of hard to tell what's going on, but it looks like video or some sort of conceptual thing going on. So that sort of seemed to be, to me, where the art world was going, and that he was taking this thing. Maybe he's taking it to the future, maybe he's taking it home. We're not quite sure exactly what's going on with it. But at the same time, he has his hand over the mouth of the old master. It's a Rembrandt image of himself that he's stealing, and he's got his hand as he's carrying it over the mouth of Rembrandt. So the old master isn't allowed to speak, which just sort of throws another level of possibility that I'm meaning, I think.
What is your definition of art?
Boy, these days it seems anything is art, and I don't try to argue that anymore. People try to make that argument, that some new thing will come along, a brick sitting in the middle of the floor or whatever, and there'll be an argument whether it's art or not. I sort of quit that because as soon as you're put in that defensive position of arguing that it's not art, you're going to lose in a way. You're going to come off as the old fuddy-duddy, whatever. So I just say everything is art. Anything that's intended to be art is art. Now let's talk about whether it's good art or not. And that's another question that starts to bring in standards and what is considered good art to an individual. Mm-hmm. And that's a little different. In that case, I think there would be things that maybe throughout history,